Hello and welcome to my presentation on the Carr Fire and a little bit about wildfires as well, as that is in fact what the Carr Fire is all about. I'm Andrew Young and I sincerely hope that you enjoy this presentation. So to start things off, what is the Carr Fire? Well, it is one of the largest fires that burned through California and a couple of the counties. Those counties being Shasta County, as seen in this photo. You can see that Shasta's historic state park is, up in flames. Not right now, but, at the time, um, the wildfire was raging, and so it burned through Shasta County and Trinity County. And this was a fairly recent wildfire. It lasted from July 23rd to August 30th in 2018. So it was fairly recent, and the fire was so out of control and so large that it burned through many cities, uh, that being Redding City, Summit City, Keswick, Lewiston, Shasta Lake City, Igo and Ono, and also the French Gulch. So, um, the way that this fire started was because, well, beforehand, before anything, conditions were actually very ideal for fire. It was hot, it was dry, there were winds that weren't so predictable. Um, According to the California Fire government related um, institution, there was a lot of unburned fuels, and all those things just made it a prime time for quite the intense fire. And so, but what actually started the fire, um, as you can see here from this quote from Meyer, it was actually a vehicle failure, It was, a tire blew out, the rim of the tire scraped on the asphalt, and it created some sparks. And those sparks happened to go just far enough off of the asphalt into the nearby, shrubbery, or any dry plant matter or whatever, that actually started the whole process. That process began at pre-ignition, and that is when the fuel actually reaches both a temperature and water content that favors ignition. So with it being so hot and dry already, um, it was it was just very ideal for pre-ignition. So you have these sparks coming in, these, as they call it, ignite sparks. These sparks come in and they start a little bit of combustion, um, which can take shape in the form of flames or smoldering coals. So, with that being said, combustion took place, and what a fire needs to really get going and to keep going is oxygen, heat, and fuel. So, there was a lot of that, you know. With it being so open in the forest, there's lots of oxygen, there's lots of fuel because there's unburned fuel everywhere. that was contributing, and it's already very hot. And with the sparks making contact with the fuel, that's just where it all started. The damage from there was huge. 229,651 acres were burned in the wildfire. Over 1,000 residencies and even more in commercial structures and other business-related structures. And these are homes and places people go to work, that was just swept up in the intensity and the uncontrollable ferocity of this Carr Fire. And to really make a point on how hard it was to contain a fire like this, there's an illustration here in the bottom right of a fire tornado. And with the unpredictable winds and the intensity of the heat and the steep terrain that made up the landscape that the Carr Fire took place, things like this actually happened. And, it was a tough job for the firefighters, to say the least. In fact, 3 firefighters gave their lives trying to contain this fire for the state of California. And unfortunately, the fire was so large and quick and out of control that 5 civilians actually became casualties as a result of this fire. So overall, it really shows just how much damage this fire did over the course of its lifetime. So, with the wildfire being so intense and so large, a lot of other hazards resulted from it. Probably the biggest, and the one that has affected the residencies and citizens of California most immediately and greatly, is the air pollution that was created from all the smoke from the fire. There was an interview from the Associated Press talking about how it affected school systems, namely elementary, in that they couldn't go outside because the air outside was just it was almost toxic. You couldn't be outside for long, and it was I'm sure it was frustrating to the kids, as it's summer, the sun's shining, and they just want to go outside and play. But with all the smoke in the air, it was just hazardous conditions outside, and so it was best to stay indoors. On top of that, with the steep terrain that the wildfire burned, there was now suddenly a greater risk for landslides. And with it being steep terrain, and with the vegetation, which had its roots in the ground, holding everything together, being burned away, suddenly, there was that greater risk. And so the wildfire continued to do damage outside of just burning homes and land down. As far as what was done, evacuations did a good job at saving a lot of lives. The fire was moving fast, and it covered a lot of area. And in fact, when it had swept over the Sacramento River, evacuations had to begin immediately. I don't think they were prepared for it to go over the river like that, but it was just an intense fire, and it jumped over the river and got into city limits. As a result of this, one of the first casualties took place, and law enforcement had to act immediately to start getting people evacuated and out of these hazardous conditions. In the bottom right, you can see an illustration of the damage that this fire did. It burned through over 1,000 residencies. But as far as what could have been done, I think that evacuations could have been more prepared, and perhaps the fire management could have been more prepared as well by burning all these fuels just laying around in these hot and dry conditions. All these extra fuels, they could have done controlled burns to bring down the risk of spread in the event of a fire. So that brings us to the end of our presentation over the Carr Fire. Moving forward, I think we can take a lot of lessons from the Carr Fire on proper evacuation management and fire management in order to avoid more damage like this in the future. So thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this presentation.